Today's news, trending. Jay Park talks about physical abuse with JYP Entertainment.
K-pop idol and entrepreneur Jay Park appeared on a podcast and talked candidly about his experience as a K-pop idol trainee under JYP Entertainment. There is a link in the description where you can go and click the article that we're covering that has the podcast embedded. But one personal observation that I had before getting into a couple statements that he made on the podcast, these hosts, as well as they make a podcast, and the podcast is very well done, high production quality, but they don't know anything about K-pop or Korean entertainment at all. They were very privileged to have Jay Park on there, and I don't think they realized how famous or how talented he actually is.
Well, they were from Seattle, and Seattle is his hometown. If you don't know, Jay Park is American. He's American-Korean, and so, or Korean-American. Yeah, Korean-American.
Jay Park did say some very interesting things on the podcast. One of his statements, "I was thinking very naively and thinking I would make some money and come back. Then I went over there and trained for about 3.5 years, and we got vocal and dance training. It was kind of like boot camp. It helped in a lot of ways, but it also killed my passion and creativity in a lot of ways as well. It's kind of like programming almost. Sing it like this, do it like this, so like you lose your individuality. At first it was really hard, you know. I'm not gonna front. I cried and I did all that, you know, it was stressful."
That sounds about right for everything that I've ever known about K-pop training. It's stressful, it's difficult, and I personally think that Jay Park probably had a slightly more difficult situation than most Korean people who are studying K-pop.
Why?
Because he was 18 years old when he went over to Korea. He didn't really speak the language. He was American. He wasn't familiar as much with the culture despite having been raised in a Korean family. And so it was all very foreign to him. He was also an 18-year-old boy who was used to b-boying. That was his thing. He was the part of the alternative b-boy crowd. And so his mom suggested that he go overseas in 2004 and audition for JYP. And he did, and he made it. But he didn't go over to Korea until 2005. You know, you're 18, you're 19 years old, and it's like, Korea hits you hard.
It's a really big culture shock for everyone. That includes people of Korean ethnicity who might have grown up in another country like Jay. And the part I think you're not bringing up is that it happened so long ago. I think 2004, 2005 idol training was definitely a lot different than these days because it was more difficult. It was less experience in the industry in general. It was more difficult for trainees because Korean culture was probably a little bit rougher on them.
Well, and they were also starting the factory-made Korean K-pop model. You wouldn't have K-pop as we know it today if it wasn't for that. And today's K-pop stars have a lot more freedom, and they encourage them to create. Companies like Big Hit Entertainment, they encourage their K-pop members to create their own songs, to write, to be more individualistic rather than the factory-made K-pop that everything is exactly the same.
Well, the factory style of producing K-pop back then actually worked very, very well. And now we're starting to see that that's not necessarily the only way that they have to do it in order to be successful. Another quote by Jay Park while he was on the podcast referring to some of his experience while being an idol trainee. "The culture in itself was kind of like when you get certain lyrics wrong or you get a certain dance move wrong, they would literally hit you. That's kind of like the Korean way, you know? It's not like that now, it's much better now, but back then they were like, you motherfucker. They wouldn't do that to me because I was very good at dancing, but I would see this dude next to me and he was getting some shit wrong and he would get his ass whooped." Now, I actually heard him say this during the podcast, so if you listen to it in context, he's being very candid and very open about something that's a bit more sensitive these days than it might have been 10, 15 years ago. I mean, we were both over in Korea in 2009. I originally went there in 2002. It was, in a way, backwater thinking. And what I mean by that is, with all of their modern technological gadgets, they still had very super conservative thinking on men and women and relationships and roles in society. Getting beaten, for instance, in school or getting hit in school by a teacher, totally common and normal 15 years ago. Now people are kind of up in arms of there's abuse going on, so it's been mostly squashed out, not completely. I don't know exactly what the laws are, but he's just talking about something that was normal, and I don't want to sit here and convey that JYP Entertainment's some really bad company. I think they're just a normal company. I'm thinking they don't beat their idols anymore.
No, I think that you're right with what you said in that it was commonplace back then, and I can attest to this because I witnessed it and experienced the transition from, like, when I first got there in 2009, kids actually, like, getting hit at Hagwons or getting spanked or whatever because they weren't properly behaving, versus when I left, I could see that that was no longer okay. And he was also very thankful for his time in JYP. He said overall he had a really good experience, and he's thankful for that. He wouldn't be where he is today if he hadn't had that experience. But it was probably really difficult at the time.
Just to be clear, though, he never got beat. Like, there was no physical abuse directed at him ever, and it was because he was very talented. So I can see why his experience is probably richer and better than maybe some other people's. But in addition to all that, reading up about Jay Park specifically on his wiki, he was only in 2 p.m. or 2 a.m., I don't remember which group, for about a year. And then Korean culture just whacked him and said, you know what, we don't like you anymore because of some shit you said on MySpace many, many years previous. And he apologized, and JYP supported him, and then he decided he was getting out. All of that I didn't know about, and it just took me back to the way that it is there for people after you spend a long time there. It just becomes very hard to feel freedom, the complete freedom. Not that there's complete freedom anyway. I don't feel like anywhere in the world is completely free, but I feel like there's constraints there that are like more like constraining than other places of the world.
Okay, well, he first off, he was a member of 2 p.m. and he was part of 2 p.m. for a while. Yes, there was an issue where Korean media in 2009 released and translated some of the comments that he wrote to his friends back in the U.S.
when he was struggling in Korea, which
struggling
is totally
with training
normal.
In 2005 when he first got to Korea. He was writing to his friends and he was talking about his issues with training in English to his friends on MySpace, which came up in 2009 because some Korea media outlet found it and translated it, which I have to say, that really sucks because...
For him.
It really sucks for him. Well, and for a lot of people to have to watch what you say that closely.
He didn't even remember what he said.
Exactly, and to get something pulled up from 2005... years later, 4 years later.
When the internet wasn't even developed back then, really.
Oh, yeah. It was, I mean, who uses MySpace?
Korea is a very unique place, though. When you go there, I think back when I first went in 2002, and there wasn't much information on the internet that you could just turn to reference in order to get information about going there and what it was going to be like, versus nowadays, I feel like kids and people who want to go there have it made. I remember a story my friend from New Zealand told me about his first week in Korea. Like, it's so reminiscent of this story because I'm sure all of us who went over there as non-Asians or just not familiar with Asian culture in general, this kid was like, my first week, I literally didn't leave my one-room apartment the entire week, and all I did was lay around, because he didn't have any furniture, because people don't have furniture over there either, which is also very common. He said he just laid on the floor and freaked out for a week.
I cried for like the first month. Like, I seriously cried. I left because I had to go to my job, and I left because my coworker lived a floor below me and was like, you, come on, we are going out for dinner. I'm going to order so you can feel comfortable, and you just have to sit there and eat and give me some money when all is said and done. Because otherwise, I would have been like your friend. Yeah. I would have been laying on my floor, crying my eyes out.
I was lucky that my apartment was furnished when I got there, but if I didn't have my British friend who helped me get the job in the first place to walk me through for weeks, I don't think it was a week, I think it was longer, I would have just totally not known what to do and probably hated it. So I can empathize with Jay Park tremendously, writing a few things about his experience early on, and him having to leave the entertainment group that he worked so hard to be a part of only a year after he started. I was like, Wow, that must have been extremely tough for him. And just to see where he is now, like he's such a leader in that industry. He's got his own entertainment company himself now, and
and he's totally taken the R&B rap world by a storm in Korea and is actually at the top. If you want to think about K-pop rappers and R&B singers, he's like the top of the top.
Hit the comments with your reaction to hearing the evolution of K-pop trainees throughout the last 15 years or so.
Would you want to be a K-pop trainee?
Back then or now or ever?
Yeah.
Okay. Let us know. Click the like button. Thank you for supporting us. Click the bell for notifications. Check out the link to K-Gal and don't forget to subscribe for more HallyuBack news. That's it. We're out of here. Hasta luego.
Bye.